And veins, arteries carry oxygenated blood from heart to different organs, and veins carry deoxygenated blood from different organs back to the heart. Then we come to the function of blood pressure. Blood pressure is defined as the lateral pressure exerted by the moving column of blood on the walls of the blood vessels. It can be arterial blood pressure, capillary blood pressure, or venous blood pressure. The blood pressure in blood vessels is traditionally expressed in millimeters of mercury. Example, 1 millimeter mercury. Systolic blood pressure in the arterial system. This refers to the maximum pressure during the systole, that is ventricular contraction of the heart. The normal systolic blood pressure ranges from 110 to 145 millimeter of Hg. Diastolic blood pressure in the arterial system, it refers to the minimum pressure exerted during the diastole or the ventricular relaxation and ranges from 70 to 90 millimeter of Hg mercury. The difference between the systolic and diastolic blood pressure is called as pulse pressure, and it is normal, that is 40 to 55 millimeter of Hg. Now, skeletal system and joints. We have finished with the muscular system and we have finished the cardiac system. Now we come to the skeletal system and joints. The skeletal or osseous system forms the framework of human body. The human body is made up of 206 bones. Now skeleton can be divided into two parts: axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton contains the middle part of the body, that is skull, vertebral column, and thoracic cage. Appendicular skeleton are the bones which helps in locomotion, that is bones of upper and lower limbs, the scapula, the clavicle, and the pelvic girdle. So this is the skeleton in which we can see appendicular skeleton and axial skeleton. Now we come to skull. The skull is a large bony structure consisting of cranium and facial bones that are attached to the cranium. So they protect the brain and other organs of the head. Then vertebral column. The vertebral column forms the axis to which other bones of the skeleton are attached. It consists of a series of vertebrae. There are 33 vertebrae. The top 7 are called as cervical vertebrae. The next 12 in the chest region are called as thoracic vertebrae. The next lower 5 are called as lumbar vertebrae. The next lower 5 which are fused together are known as sacrum. The last portion of the vertebral column consists of 4 fused vertebrae, that is called as coccyx. The skull is attached to the top of the skeleton and pelvis is joined to the sacrum of the vertebral column. Then thoracic cage. The thoracic cage is formed by the thoracic vertebra at the back and sternum or the breastbone in the front and 12 pairs of ribs on the side. Then we come to appendicular skeleton, the upper bones and lower bones. The upper bones are consisting of shoulder, that is pectoral girdle, and a pair of upper limbs. This is called as upper bones. Each upper limb consists of upper arm formed by the bones called humerus, forearm consisting of radius and ulna, wrist consisting of carpal bones, palm formed by metacarpal bones, and fingers formed by phalanges. Now we come to the lower bones. It consists of pelvic girdle and a pair of lower limbs. The lower limbs consist of upper thigh bone, that is femur, which is the longest bone in our body also. Then patella, that is the kneecap. Then lower part of hind limb, which is below the femur and consists of two bones, that is tibia and fibula. Together these bones are collectively referred to as tibiofibular bone. Ankle, which consists of tarsal bones. Then intermediate region of the foot, which is composed of metatarsals, also called as metatarsal bones. And finally the toes formed by the phalanges. Now we come to the joints, their composition and movement. Joint is a region where two or more bones unite. The joints are classified into three types on the basis of composition and the degree of movement associated with each joint in the skeleton. First one is fibrous joint, second one is cartilaginous joint, and third one is synovial joints. And they have different functions in the movement of the body. Now this unit is finished. We will start with the second unit, anatomy and physiology of various body systems. The objectives of this unit is to elaborate on the organization and structure of respiratory system and discuss the physiology of respiration, then write about the organization, structure, anatomy of digestive system and the physiology of digestion, describe the role or functional unit of the nervous system, the neuron, describe the organization of the nervous system, and describe the structure, anatomy, and physiology roles of the various components of nervous system. Now, first we will start with respiratory system. In last unit, we studied about cardiac system, cardiovascular system, and skeletal system. We will start in this unit with respiratory system. The respiratory system in the structure in the body through which the oxygenation of blood takes by the means of respiration. So the importance of respiration is body is given below, that is it is required for the exchange of gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, provides oxygen which causes oxidation of food materials for energy requirement of the body, aids in maintaining the pH of the blood by eliminating carbon dioxide, helps in the excretion of volatile substances like ammonia, water vapors from the respiratory system, also helps in maintaining the temperature of the body, filters inspired air, and produces sound in the form of vocal cords. Now, the respiratory system is structurally divided into two parts: the upper respiratory system, which comprises of the nose or nasal cavity, pharynx, and associated structures; the lower respiratory system, which includes the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and the lungs. So first we will come to the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity has olfactory or smell receptors which help in detecting smells, and it is the entry point of air from the nasal cavity into the nose. Nasopharynx is the junction between nasal and oral cavity. An epiglottis is present here, which is like lid-like structure that closes the air pipe trachea when food or water is swallowed. So there are two pipes in our pharynx. One goes into the food pipe and one goes into the air pipe through trachea. So there is epiglottis which closes the trachea when food or water is swallowed. Otherwise, it will go inside the respiratory system and it can cause severe blockage and it may cause death also. Now, pharynx. Pharynx or throat is a funnel shaped tube about 5 inches long. It lies just posterior to the nasal cavity with which it communicates by means of two openings called internal layers and oral cavity. Now, larynx. Larynx is also called as the voice box. The movement of air through this cavity helps in the generation and modulation of voice through vocal cords. Trachea. The trachea or windpipe is a tubular passageway for air and is about 5 inches long. So this is the respiratory system starting from nasal cavity, pharynx, epiglottis to larynx and trachea, and through the lungs. Bronchi and bronchioles. The trachea bifurcates into two bronchi, that is right primary bronchus which goes into right lung and left primary bronchus which goes into left bronchi. Then it further divides into bronchioles and terminal bronchioles which is present in the lung tissue. Lungs and alveoli. There are two lungs in the human body, one on either side of the chest or thorax, also containing a called as thoracic cavity. Now there are different types of alveoli which originates from the tertiary bronchi, and these are the main bags which help in respiration, which helps in transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide from the blood in the lungs, from the lungs to the blood in the lungs, which is oxygenated blood, and from blood to again to the lung tissue, that is deoxygenated blood, to maintain the respiration of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So we help they help in respiration. We come to the external respiration, which involves the exchange of gases between the air spaces of the lungs and blood in pulmonary capillaries. In this process, blood of the capillary becomes oxygenated by gaining oxygen and losing carbon dioxide. This process of oxygenation of blood takes place in the alveoli, which are thin walled structures surrounded by capillaries. So, deoxygenated blood from the capillaries is entered into the alveoli, and further it is respired out through the nostrils, and oxygenated blood from the alveoli, it enters to the capillaries. Oxygen enters from the alveoli to the capillaries in the form of oxygenated blood. Now internal respiration, which is the exchange of gases between blood in the systemic capillaries and tissue cells. The hemoglobin in the blood loses oxygen and gains carbon dioxide. It loses oxygen and distributes oxygen into different tissues of the body, and gains carbon dioxide from the tissues, which are the waste material in the body. Now we come to physiological respiratory volumes. The respiratory volumes are studied for diagnosis of respiratory diseases. These respiratory volumes are obtained by using an instrument called as spirometer. Now, respiratory volumes can be of different types like tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, vital capacity, residual volume, and total lung capacity. Tidal volume is the volume of air taken in one breath, that is around 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume is the additional volume of air that can be taken in by forced inspiration over and above the tidal volume, that is around 3100 milliliter. Expiratory reserve volume, the volume of air in excess of tidal volume that can be exhaled forcibly, that is 1200 ml. And the vital capacity is the sum of inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and expiratory reserve volume, that is around 4300 ml in adult male and 3100 ml in adult female. Then there are residual volume, the volume of air which remains in the lungs after maximum expiration, that is exhaled forcibly. It is called as residual volume, and it is around 1200 ml. Total lung capacity is the sum of all these volumes, and it is around 500 ml to 6000 ml. Now we come to the another important system, that is called as digestive system. The digestive system is composed of the gastrointestinal tract along with glands associated with the digestive system. It deals with the digestion and absorption of food materials eaten or ingested by the human beings, and elimination of waste materials from the body in the form of feces. Now it contains of oral cavity, part of pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. So this is the whole digestive system. Accessory digestive organs are like teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, which are helping in digestion. We come to oral cavity. In the oral cavity, we try to chew the food, and the chewing and grinding of food is called as mastication. In the mouth, saliva is present, which is secreted by the paired salivary gland formed of three glands, that is parotid gland, submaxillary gland, and sublingual salivary glands. Saliva lubricates the fluid and helps in mastication of food. From oral cavity, it goes into pharynx. The pharynx connects the oral cavity to the esophagus of the digestive tract. When the food is first swallowed, it passes from mouth into the pharynx via the esophagus by the act of swallowing or deglutition. We come to esophagus. It is also called as gullet. It is long hollow tube about 25 centimeter long and connects the pharynx to the stomach. The esophagus does not produce digestive enzymes nor is it involved in absorption. It is just a passing pipe from pharynx to stomach. Stomach is an important organ. Stomach is the enlargement of the GI tract. It is J-shaped hollow muscular organ that lies in the abdomen below the diaphragm. Lying beneath the stomach is pancreas. The stomach is involved in the second phase of digestion following mastication. The first stage of digestion, as you will recall, takes place in the mouth. The stomach connects to the duodenum to the other side. The duodenum is the first part of small intestine. The capacity of the stomach is 1 to 2 liters. And these are the structures of stomach: cardia, fundus, body or corpus, and pylorus antrum, from which it goes into duodenum. Now we come to the small intestine. It is divided into three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Duodenum is 25 centimeters, jejunum is 2.5 meters, and ileum is 3.5 meters. Duodenum is the first and shortest part of the small intestine and is totally above the stomach region. Jejunum and ileum. All the three parts of the small intestine help in digestion and intake of nutrients from the food. The predominant cell type of epithelium of the small intestine is enterocytes or absorptive cells. Digested food is absorbed by these cells. The absorbed substances either enter the capillaries or the lymphatic lacteals, mostly lipids and lipoprotein particles, which are present below the epithelium of the small intestine. Then we come to large intestine. Large intestine, which starts with cecum, colon, and rectum. Hanging below the ileocecal sphincter is a blind pouch called cecum, and it attached to cecum is a twisted coiled tube called as appendix or vermiform appendix. The open end of cecum merges with a long tube of large intestine called colon, which is the beginning of the large intestine. The colon can be structurally subdivided into ascending colon from the cecum to transverse colon, and then descending colon, and lastly sigmoid colon, which enters into rectum. The main function of large intestine are absorption of water and formation of solid stool, that is feces, and also absorption of electrolytes, secretion of mucus, and absorption of vitamins synthesized by bacteria called as colonic bacteria, which is found in colon. Then we come to rectum and anus. The rectum forms the terminal part of digestive tract and terminates at the anus. The rectum stores the fecal material from the colon. When the rectum gets filled up, when there is stimulation, these feces are passed out through the anus. This process of passing out of stool to the outside by the anus is known as defecation and is under voluntary control of the human beings. Now, there are different glands: salivary glands, gastric glands of the stomach. Then we can see glands of the small intestine and glands of the colon. Now, most important and heaviest gland is liver. Liver is not an organ, liver is a gland. It is the heaviest gland of the body. It weighs about 1.36 kg. The liver is reddish brown in color and is divided into four lobes, unequal size and shape. The liver lies on the right side of the abdominal cavity behind the diaphragm, beneath the diaphragm. The liver secretes the bile juice, which helps in emulsification of fats. The bile is stored in the gallbladder, from which it is released in the response to hormonal stimulus. The gallbladder is a pear-shaped sac with a diameter of 7 to 10 centimeter. It is located in the posterior surface of the liver. Now there is pancreas. Pancreatic juice, which consists of pancreatic amylase, which helps in digesting carbohydrates, pancreatic lipase, which helps in digesting fat, and pancreatic trypsin, which helps in digesting protein, and pancreatic chymotrypsin, which is also another protein digesting enzyme. The remaining 1% of the cells of the pancreas are organized into clusters called pancreatic islets of Langerhans that form the endocrine part of the pancreas. These cells secrete the hormones such as glucagon, insulin, somatostatin, and pancreatic polypeptide. These hormones are secreted into the bloodstream directly and not into the duct. Now we come to the very important system called as nervous system. The nervous system along with endocrine system shares the responsibility for maintaining the homeostasis of the body. Now types of neuron forming the functional unit of nervous system. The functional unit of nervous system is neuron. Physiologically, the nerves or neurons can be divided into two types: afferent or sensory nerves, efferent or motor nerves. So, the senses which we sense from the sensory nerves are afferent nerves, which bring the stimuli from the environment to the different senses to the central nervous system. And efferent or motor nerves are used to do different functions voluntarily, involuntary, from the nervous system to the body parts. The neurons may be present as a single neuron or may be present in the form of cluster or collective tissue, which when they are present as collective, they are known as ganglion. Now, physiological properties of nerve. There are two main properties of nerve which are called as excitability and conductivity. Excitability is the property of the nerve to respond to a stimulus which may be mechanical, electrical, or chemical. For example, when smell reaches the nostrils, the nerves in the nostrils are stimulated by the smell. The smell acts as the stimulus. Then it also helps in conductivity. Conductivity is the ability of the nerve fiber to conduct or transmit the impulse that has been generated along its entire length. Now we come to the anatomical structures of nervous system. Anatomically, the structures of nervous system can be divided into five parts, that is brain, which is the most important organ in our body, protective coverings of the brain, that is the bones, cranial bones and spinal cord, and meninges, that is the covering of the brain, and cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid present in the spinal cord. Cerebral ventricles, which are hollow places in the brain, and the spinal cord. Brain can be divided into forebrain, that is cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, midbrain, and hindbrain. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves numbered 1 to 12 which arise from the base of the brain. The main functions of brain are detection and processing of sensory information, orientation and control of muscular movement, and maintenance of consciousness. Now we come to meninges. Meninges form a covering that encloses the brain and the spinal cord. The meninges surrounding the brain are called the cranial meninges. The meninges continue downwards in the spinal region as the spinal meninges and protect the spinal cord. Cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear, colorless, watery tissue fluid present in the subarachnoid space, ventricles, and the central canal of the spinal cord. This helps in it acts as a buoyant fluid and a shock absorber to the brain and the spinal cord and to supply nutrition to the nervous tissue. Cerebral ventricles. The brain has cavities called cerebral ventricles which are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. So there may be lateral ventricles, interventricular foramen, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, Then we come to spinal cord. Spinal cord is the downward continuation of the brain. It connects to the brain at the foramen magnum bone of the skull. The spinal cord is encircled and protected, as mentioned before, by the bones of the vertebral column. The spinal cord contains about 100 million neurons. 100 million neurons. 31 pairs of spinal nerves emerge from the spinal cord, each serving a specific region of the right or left side of the body. So these are the spinal cord and spinal nerves. Organization of the nervous system. It can be divided according to their functions into different parts. Central nervous system comprising of brain and spinal cord. Then peripheral nervous system, which contain all nervous tissue outside the sinus, namely cranial nerves, their branches, spinal nerves and their branches, ganglia and sensory receptors. The somatic nervous system. The voluntary or motor nervous system is called as somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system consists of somatic sensory neurons that convey information from somatic and special sensory receptors, primarily in the head, body wall, and limbs, to the CNS. Somatic motor neurons from CNS that conduct impulses to the skeletal muscles only. An autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system of the PNS supply all organs except the skeletal muscles. The autonomic nervous system consisting of sensory neurons that convey information from autonomic sensory receptors located primarily in the viscera to the CNS, and motor neurons from the CNS that conduct nerve impulses to the smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, glands, and adipose tissue. Then we come to the parasympathetic nervous system. This is also referred as craniosacral nervous system. It is formed by the third, seventh, ninth, tenth cranial nerves and third to fifth sacral nerves. Sympathetic nervous system is also known as thoracolumbar nervous system. So they help in autonomous nervous system. So functions of the nervous system. First, we can see sensory functions. So from the external or internal stimuli, the sensory organs sense the stimulus and brings it back to the CNS. Then integrative system. The nervous system integrate or processes sensory information by the by analyzing and storing some of it and by making decisions regarding appropriate responses. Motor function. The nervous system motor function involves responding to integration decision of the brain and or of spinal cord. Now this unit is also over. We'll start with the last unit which we'll study today, unit 3, which is anatomy and physiology of various body systems, part 2. So the objectives of this unit is list and describe the different types of special senses and their role in the human body. Describe the structure and function of genital and urinary system in the body. Explain the process of oogenesis and spermatogenesis in the reproductive system, and list and write about the location of the important endocrine glands, and list and describe the important hormones secreted by human body. It can be pain, heat, pressure, and are classified as somatic senses. Visual system or eye and vision. Anatomy of eye. The eye consists of three layers which are follows: sclera, choroids, and retina. The choroid is the anterior surface. The anterior surface is also pigmented and forms the iris. The iris has a central opening called pupil. The lens of the eye is attached to the choroid layer by means of suspensory ligaments. The chamber in front of lens is known as aqueous humor, and the chamber behind the lens is called as vitreous humor. The retina, which is the most important part of eye, it is composed of nervous tissue formed of retinal neurons, which are photoreceptors, that are rods that are intensity receptors, and cones that are color receptors. This is the Anatomy of the eye. Physiology of vision. The light enters the eye through the pupil, whose diameter, as you will recall, is controlled by the iris. The change in diameter of the pupil depends on the intensity of the incident light. The aperture size of the pupil becomes smaller in size in presence of strong light and increases in size in dim light. The light, after passing through the pupil, the light falls on the lens of the eye. The lens, because of its elasticity, has an adjustable curvature, and because of the elasticity, concentrates the light into the retina. The sensitive pigments on the retina get bleached, become colorless on exposure to incident light, and this bleaching leads to the generation of nerve impulse. This is the function of eye. Then we come to auditory system, that is ear and hearing system. The ear, in addition to being responsible for the function of hearing, is also responsible for maintenance of body equilibrium. The nerve circuit that connects the auditory organ with the brain is formed by eighth cranial nerve. Now, anatomy of the ear. It can be divided into three parts: external ear, middle ear, and internal ear. External ear, which is also called as pinna, and in ear canal, that is external auditory canal. External auditory canal transmits the sound waves onto a thin membrane called as eardrum or tympanic membrane, from where the middle ear starts. The air pressure in the middle ear is maintained in equilibrium with the atmospheric air pressure through a tube known as eustachian tube that opens in the nasopharynx. The middle ear is made up of three bone ossicles named on the basis of their shape: the malleus, incus, and stapes. Now, stapes is the smallest bone in our body. Longest bone is femur, and smallest bone is stapes. Internal ear. This chamber is also known as bony labyrinth. The inner ear is further divisible into three parts: the vestibule, the three semicircular canals, and the cochlea. So this is the whole anatomy of the ear. Now we come to the physiology of hearing. The sequence of events that take place for perception of hearing of sound can be summarized as follows. The sound waves that are trapped by the pinna are directed into the external auditory canal. These waves then strike the tympanic membrane eardrum that produces oscillation on the membrane. These oscillations are then transmitted onto the bones or of the middle ear, namely the malleus, incus, and stapes. These waves are transmitted by the stapes to the vestibule that transmits the sound waves into the cochlea. This sets up disturbances in the fluid contained within the cochlea. These disturbances are picked up by the hair cells called organ of Corti, which are contained within the cochlear region. The organ of Corti, by some unknown mechanism, causes the generation of membrane potential. This membrane potential is converted into the action potential, which is carried to the auditory centers of the brain through the cochlear branch of the eighth cranial nerve, which is called vestibulocochlear nerve. In the auditory centers, the information is processed and perception of sound or hearing occurs. Now we come to the another system, gustatory system, which consists of tongue and the taste. The sensory system of taste is also called as gustatory system, which contains the tongue. Along with the tongue, which is the main sensory organ of the taste, other sensory areas of the taste include the soft palate, the posterior part of the mouth, the pharynx, the throat, the larynx, that is the voice box, the epiglottis, that is cartilage lid over the voice box. In humans, taste is detected by the means of taste receptor cells, which form clusters called taste buds. Now, anatomy of the taste bud. Taste buds are found on elevated regions called papillae, present on the upper surface of the tongue. Physiology of taste. In order to get that sensation of taste, a substance should first get dissolved in the saliva, and then it should come in contact with the taste cells in the taste buds. In the tongue, the arrangement of the taste buds of different types is not even. As a result, some parts of the tongue are more sensitive to a particular taste and less sensitive to others. The tip of the tongue is more sensitive to sweet and salt. The sides are sensitive to sour and salt, and back is sensitive to bitter taste. The taste perceptions are carried by the nerve fibers innervating these taste buds to the thalamus and cerebral cortex. In this region of the brain, the signals are interpreted as taste. Now we come to the olfactory system, that is the nose and smell system. The olfactory system is the sensory system used for olfaction or smell. The olfactory system is often clubbed along with gustatory system and is termed as chemosensory senses because both are able to perceive chemical signals, both gustatory system and olfactory system. The olfactory receptors are specialized receptors that are bipolar sensory nerves which have two processes extending from the cell body. Now, physiology of olfaction. The substances should be gaseous and soluble in the fluid of the nasal cavity in the order to stimulate the olfactory receptors. The chemical substances stimulate the sensory cells. This stimulation leads to the generation of nerve impulse that is carried to the brain, which is responsible for the perception of smell in the human body. And somatic sensory system. The somatosensory system is a diverse sensory system consisting of receptors and processing centers which produce the vast range of sensations such as touch, temperature, proprioception or body position, and nociception, which are pain receptors. The sensory receptors cover the skin, epithelium, skeletal muscles, bones and joints, internal organs, and cardiovascular system. Somatosensory organ of touch. These nerves are of different types like Meissner's corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, and Croce end bulb. Then reproductive system. In humans, the reproductive system is discussed generally along with the excretory system and so is collectively known as genito-urinary system or the urogenital system. Reproduction is the process of producing offsprings or children. The mode of reproduction in humans, as in other higher animals, is sexual. The males contribute by producing sperm. The sperm fertilizes the egg inside the woman body, which eventually develops into a human child. So the male reproductive system consisting of testes, ducts of system, axillary sex glands, and copulatory organ that is called as penis. So the testis is the male gonads and are called as testicles or testes. These testes are oval-shaped paired bodies which are lodged within the scrotum. The main function of testes are production of spermatozoa and the male sex hormone testosterone. Now there are different accessory sex glands also like seminal vesicles, prostate gland, bulbourethral glands. Now, secretions of male reproductive tract, that is semen. The semen or seminal fluid is the secretion of male reproductive tract. It is composed of spermatozoa or sperm, prostatic secretions, secretions of the seminal vesicles, and the accessory sex glands. Testosterone is a hormone which is described in the endocrine system of the unit. Female reproductive tract, also called as, can be divided into external genitalia and internal reproductive structure. External genitalia consist of vulva, labia majora, labia minora, and clitoris. Internal reproductive structures consist of single vagina, single uterus, paired fallopian tubes, and paired ovaries, which produces the egg in the female body. The uterus. Uterus is a single central inverted pear-shaped muscular hollow organ that is necessary for the process of gestation, that is period of growth of baby inside the mother's body in the female. Then there is fallopian tube. There are two fallopian tubes, one on each side. Each fallopian tube connects to its ovary to the uterus. Ovaries. Ovaries closely associated with the end of each fallopian tube is a walnut-shaped ovary, which is the female gonad. The ovaries are paired structures that lie at the free end of the fallopian tubes. Egg production takes place within the ovaries. The two major steroid hormones produced by human ovaries are progesterone and estradiol, which is a form of estrogen. Production of these two hormones vary widely over the course of menstrual cycle. A physiology of menstruation. Menstruation is thus the cycling flow of blood due to shedding of the endometrial lining from the uterus of a woman at monthly intervals. The general duration of menstrual cycle is 28 days with menstrual flow for a period of 3.5 days. Menstrual cycle in women begins at the onset of puberty and continues till menopause when ovulation stops. A menstrual cycle consists of following four phases: menstrual phase, proliferative phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. Now, spermatogenesis and oogenesis. The process by which the formation of mature spermatozoa and ovum takes place in the males and females is respectively called spermatogenesis and oogenesis. During this process, the number of chromosomes in the cells is reduced from 46, that is diploid number, to 23, that is haploid number. The cell division, which causes the reduction of chromosomes from 46 to 23, is known as meiosis. And normal cell division is called as mitosis. The diploid chromosome number is achieved only after the formation of the embryo, which forms the union of haploid sperm and egg, that is diploid number of cell chromosomes. The urinary system. The urinary system deals with the excretion of liquid waste in the form of urine from the body. The urinary tract in male and female consists of paired kidneys and paired ureters, single bladder and single urethra. Now, structure of kidney can be divided. The structural is the structure of kidney is mainly formed of nephron. The glomerulus is surrounded by the capsular structure of the uriniferous tubule known as Bowman's capsule. The uriniferous tubule is consists of proximal tubules and loop of Henle and distal convoluted tubules. The distal convoluted tubule leads into the collecting duct. The distal convoluted tubes of the several nephrons empty into a single collecting duct. Now, blood supply. The blood supply of kidneys through the renal artery and the venous deoxygenated drainage removal is through the renal vein. Physiology of the uniform formation. Nephrons have three main functions: filtering blood, which takes in the renal corpuscle of uriniferous tubule, then returning useful substances back into the blood so that they are not lost from the body, which is accomplished in the uriniferous tubule, and removing substance from body that are not required by the blood, which is also done by uriniferous tubules. Now we come to the endocrine system. Endocrine system and the nervous system together coordinate all the functions of the body. In the endocrine system consists of endocrine glands. These glands of the endocrine system help coordinate function of the body by releasing into the bloodstream or extracellular fluid mediator molecules called hormones. The circulatory blood helps deliver the hormones to virtually all cells throughout the body. Hormones help in maintaining homeostasis, that is, condition in which the body's internal environment remains relatively constant within physiological limits. It contains of various glands like pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, pineal gland, parathyroid gland. These are several There are several hormone secreting organs and tissues in the body, as you can see from the list, like hypothalamus, thymus, pancreas, gonadal glands, kidneys, stomach, liver, small intestine, skin, heart, adipose tissue, and placenta. Hypothalamus and its hormones. Hypothalamus gland is a small area in the brain located below the thalamus of the brain. It, it is major integrating link between the nervous and endocrine system. Cells in the hypothalamus synthesize at least 9 different hormones, and the pituitary gland secretes 7 hormones. Together, these hormones play an important role in the regulation of virtually all aspects of growth, development, metabolism, and homeostasis. The hypothalamus controls the release and inhibition of hormones of the anterior pituitary gland. The hypothalamus stimulates the release of the secretion of the anterior pituitary gland by its releasing hormones, and also suppresses the secretion of anterior pituitary by its inhibiting hormones. Now there are different hormones and hormones secreting glands. We come to thyroid gland. The thyroid follicular cells secrete two important thyroid hormones, namely thyroxine and triiodothyronine. The third hormone, calcitonin, is also secreted by the thyroid gland. Calcitonin helps regulate calcium homeostasis in the body. Now, adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex is divided into three parts: the outer zona glomerulosa, which secretes mineralocorticoid hormones that help control water and electrolyte homeostasis; the middle zone, called the zona fasciculata, secretes the glucocorticoids hormone, which affect glucose homeostasis. The glucocorticoids regulate metabolism and resistance to stress and include the following hormones: cortisol or hydrocortisone, corticosterone, and cortisone. A third layer, called zona reticularis, secretes small quantities of weak steroid hormones like androgens, that are male sex hormones. Adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla consists of hormone producing cells called chromaffin cells, which surround large blood vessels. The two main hormones synthesized by the adrenal medulla are epinephrine and norepinephrine. The effect of these hormones is to produce fight or flight responses during an emergency. The pancreas. Now, in pancreas, scattered among the exocrine acini are 1 to 2 million tiny cluster of endocrine tissue called pancreatic islets or islets of Langerhans. Endocrine tissue of pancreas includes four types of hormone secreting cells: alpha cells or A cells, that constitute about 20% of pancreatic islet cells and secrete glucagons; beta cells or B cells, which constitute of 70% of pancreatic islet and secrete insulin in the sugar metabolism; delta or D cells, forming about 5% of pancreatic islets, which secretes somatostatin, identical to the growth hormone inhibiting hormone secreted by the hypothalamus; and F cells, which constitute the remainder of pancreatic islet cells and secrete pancreatic polypeptide. So, insulin, the hyposecretion of insulin leads to development of diabetes mellitus, which is characterized by elevated blood glucose or hyperglycemia, loss of glucose through urine, glycosuria, excessive urine production, that is polyuria, due to inability of kidneys to reabsorb water, and polydipsia, that is excessive thirst, and polyphagia, that is excessive eating. The ovaries secrete two female hormones called estrogen and progesterone, which helps in reproductive system and menstrual cycle of the females. The testes secrete the male sex hormones called the testosterone and helps in the male reproductive system. Okay, now we have finished this unit also. I will stop sharing now. So we have finished the class today. We'll discuss further in the next class. Okay, is it okay? We'll
O-
further discuss
Okay, sir.
the units in the next class.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you so much for listening patiently.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.